Sometimes the only thing dumber than breaking the law is how people avoid it. 1. The man who married his land to dodge property tax, 1848 Vermont. Meet Horace Greeley, a farmer who discovered that if land was jointly owned with a spouse, it couldn't be seized for debt. The problem? Horace didn't have a wife. The solution? He married his farm. Literally. He wrote up a contract, held a mock ceremony with his horse as witness, and declared Miss Acre his lawful bride. The court laughed, then realized the law never said your spouse had to be human. Technically, Horace won. He kept his land and lived happily ever after with Mrs. Acre. It's the only marriage in U.S. history where the honeymoon involved plowing fields and arguing with a fence post. 2. The guy who claimed his cat was his employee to avoid income tax, 1993, Germany. A small business owner wanted to deduct employee expenses to save on taxes. So he filled out paperwork for his assistant, a feline named Lucy, complete with a salary of cat food and nap time benefits. When the tax office demanded proof of work, he mailed a photo of Lucy sitting on a calculator. Somehow, it worked, for 2 full years. It wasn't until an auditor visited and asked for Lucy's signature that the scheme unraveled. The man was fined, but honestly, the fact that bureaucrats approved a cat payroll proves tax law isn't broken. It's just napping in a sunbeam like Lucy. 3. The drunk driver who beat his DUI by claiming he wasn't driving, 1987, Minnesota. When police found a man passed out behind the wheel of his running car, he was charged with drunk driving, but in court he argued he wasn't driving. He was merely using the car as a heated sleeping arrangement. The judge, with the patience of a saint, checked the law and found it didn't technically define driving as being behind the wheel while stationary. The man was acquitted, and the case set a weird precedent that lawyers still cite today. Moral of the story: if you ever get caught drunk in your car, just tell the officer you're not intoxicated. You're participating in climate-controlled rest. 4. The priest who sold get-out-of-jail-free certificates. Italy, 1517. Before Monopoly invented its famous card, the Catholic Church had a real version, indulgences. But one Italian priest, Father Giovanni, took it to Olympic levels of absurdity. He realized that if the church forgave sins in exchange for donations, he could make a fortune. So he began selling handwritten certificates promising immediate forgiveness for future crimes, drunkenness, gambling, even creative adultery. His best customer? A nobleman who bought 12 in advance, calling them his sin subscription plan. Giovanni made so much money the local bishop thought he was blessed by God, until he discovered the priest had used the profits to buy a vineyard and a mistress. Giovanni was excommunicated, but honestly, he didn't seem to care. He just opened his own independent church of unlimited forgiveness. History doesn't record how long it lasted, but it's safe to assume his final words were something like, "I'd like to cash in my last indulgence, please." 5. The tax-free island of beer, 1970s Denmark. In the 70s, a tiny Danish island called Ertelmene discovered a loophole so brilliant it sounded fake. The government forgot to include it in the National Tax Registry. That meant no taxes at all. For 2 glorious decades, the residents lived in beer-fueled bliss, paying 0 to the state while importing cheap liquor for personal consumption. Tourists started calling it the Drunken Vatican. The government eventually caught on when someone tried to register a fake company there called Taxless Paradise LLC. Bureaucrats shut it down, but not before the island's mayor smugly reminded them, "We weren't evading taxes, we were just never invited to pay them." For years afterward, Danes joked that moving to Ertelmene was cheaper than therapy and came with better beer. 6. The loophole that let Al Capone's brother become a lawman, 1920s USA. While Al Capone was busy perfecting organized crime, his older brother James Capone found a loophole that made him a sheriff. After moving to Nebraska, he legally changed his name to Richard Hart and claimed he'd been born in the Midwest. No one bothered to check. This was the 1920s, when ID was basically just a good handshake. He rose through the ranks, arresting bootleggers and giving interviews about how proud he was to fight crime wherever it hides. All while his brother Al was the crime. When reporters finally uncovered the truth, Richard shrugged and said, "Well, I'm still arresting bad guys." Technically, he never lied. He just omitted that the bad guy in question sometimes sent him Christmas cards signed, "Your loving brother, Scarface." 7. The millionaire who claimed to be dead to avoid taxes, 1931, UK. Charles Dawson, a wealthy eccentric, discovered a fascinating loophole. You can't tax the dead. So he faked his own death. He staged a boating accident, left an empty life jacket floating on the Thames, and watched from a nearby pub as the newspapers mourned his tragic drowning. He lived for years in his own mansion under a fake name, pretending to be the estate's caretaker. The ruse only ended when he tried to collect his own inheritance. The judge reportedly said, "Mr. Dawson, you can't inherit from yourself." Caught and fined, Dawson smiled and replied, "Worth every penny, Your Honor." It's the only time in history someone paid more taxes after coming back from the dead. 8. The lawyer who discovered the invisible car. Defense, 2008 USA. In 2008, a man in California got caught speeding at 194 Minor First. Instead of pleading guilty, his lawyer argued the radar gun couldn't have accurately clocked him because his car was painted with anti-radar stealth paint. The so-called invisible car defense actually worked. The judge dismissed the case, not because the paint existed, it didn't, but because the police couldn't prove it didn't. For a week, every defense lawyer in the state tried the same trick, claiming their clients were driving camouflaged vehicles. The state finally passed a law clarifying that science fiction was not a valid defense. The driver, however, became a legend. His speeding ticket vanished like his imaginary stealth car. Somewhere out there, a painter is still waiting for his Nobel Prize in fictional physics. 9. The farmer who claimed his pig was a dependent, 1952, Iowa. When the IRS introduced personal deductions, one Iowa farmer named Clyde Jenkins saw an opportunity wrapped in bacon. He realized the law didn't specify that dependents had to be human, just individuals reliant on the taxpayer for care. So he filed taxes listing his 400-pound hog, Bessie, as his daughter. He even attached a photo of her sitting in a child's high chair. The IRS sent an auditor, but Clyde doubled down, showing Bessie's birth certificate and veterinary bills as proof of dependent care. The case went viral in local newspapers, and the IRS dropped it, fearing public ridicule. Clyde celebrated by throwing Bessie a Sweet 16 birthday party. When asked if he'd do it again, he said, "Only if she goes to college." Somewhere in Iowa, there's probably still a pig with a better tax record than half the country. 10. The man who declared his house a sovereign nation, 1997, Florida. In 1997, a retired Navy engineer named Bill Smith discovered a clause in maritime law allowing sovereign entities to exist in unclaimed territories. He argued that his property, built on a patch of swampy land between two counties, qualified as terra nullius, meaning no man's land. So he printed a flag, declared independence, and named it the Republic of Bill. He even issued passports and charged his neighbors customs fees. When county officials tried to fine him for unpaid property tax, he responded, "I'm a foreign government. Talk to my ambassador." Legal chaos ensued, with real lawyers debating whether the Swamp Kingdom technically existed. It didn't, of course, but Bill got 2 years of tax-free living and local celebrity status. His national motto? "In Bill we trust. Everyone else pays." 11. The couple who got divorced to save on taxes, 2004, Canada. Imagine explaining to your spouse that you're breaking up for financial reasons. That's exactly what one Canadian couple did. They discovered a government loophole granting single parents major tax breaks, so they divorced, on paper only. They still lived together, shared everything, and even celebrated their divorce anniversary. For 5 years, they saved thousands annually until a tax auditor noticed their supposedly separate addresses were the same, right down to the Christmas lights. When questioned, they claimed it was a coincidence and that they were amicable neighbors. The judge, suppressing laughter, ruled against them, but admitted it was an innovative approach to marital budgeting. Their friends called them romantically divorced, which honestly sounds more functional than half of modern marriages. 12. The bar owner who made beer tax-free by changing the definition, 1982, Ireland. Patrick O'Malley, owner of a Dublin pub, found himself drowning in beer taxes until he realized the law defined beer as a fermented malt beverage. So he stopped calling his drink beer and started labeling it fermented cereal soup. He even printed menus that read Soup of the Day, Lager. Inspectors arrived, skeptical but legally trapped, because technically he was serving soup. The loophole lasted 8 glorious months before the government changed the wording. Patrick became a local hero, with his bar plastered in headlines like, "The man who beat the beer tax." When asked if the drink still tasted like soup, he said, "Only if you drink enough of it." The government closed the loophole, but the legend of O'Malley's brew soup lives on in Dublin pubs to this day. 13. The billionaire who moved his yacht to nowhere. 2011, Monaco. When France introduced a luxury tax on superyachts, billionaire Philippe Renault, no relation to the car, decided to get creative. He anchored his 300-foot yacht in a tiny patch of Mediterranean water, technically between national boundaries, a nautical no-man's land. He registered it under a shell company in the Republic of Sealand, a concrete sea fort that claimed to be an independent country. Authorities tried to fine him, but couldn't decide which country had the right to do it. For 3 years, he floated tax-free, hosting lavish parties under his own flag. Locals called it the floating loophole. When Monaco eventually expanded its jurisdiction, Philippe sailed away laughing, saying, "I'll pay taxes when the sea does." The man literally turned geography into a tax shelter. 14. The man who beat a jaywalking ticket by arguing. He wasn't a pedestrian. 1965, California. A California man named Raymond Clark was fined for jaywalking, but he noticed the municipal code defined pedestrians as persons traveling on foot. His defense? He was technically hopping on one foot because he'd twisted his ankle. The judge, equal parts baffled and entertained, reviewed the wording and had to admit it didn't exclude hopping. The case was dismissed, and Raymond reportedly limped out of court grinning. Lawmakers amended the code within a week, but by then, Raymond had become a local folk hero. A newspaper headline read, "One small hop for man, one giant loophole for mankind." Somewhere in Los Angeles, there's probably still a crosswalk dedicated to the man who legally hopped his way to freedom. 15. The accountant who claimed heaven as his primary residence. 1989, Texas. An eccentric accountant named Harold Jenkins filed his taxes listing heaven as his home address. When the IRS flagged it, he sent back a 20-page letter citing religious freedom, arguing his soul, and therefore his true identity, resided in heaven. Because the law required taxes from residents of earthly jurisdictions, he claimed exemption. The IRS called it creative nonsense, but a judge agreed to hear it. Jenkins arrived in a white suit, carrying a halo-shaped binder. When asked for proof of residence, he smiled and said, "Faith." The case was thrown out, but the judge ended his ruling with, "While Mr. Jenkins does not currently live in heaven, his argument was saintly creative." Harold paid his taxes and started teaching celestial accounting seminars for fun. 16. The guy who turned a parking ticket into a religion. 2015, Oregon. When a Portland man named Jeremy Nelson got a $65 parking ticket, he decided divine intervention was overdue. He founded a religion, the Church of Eternal Parking. Its central belief? All land is sacred, therefore all parking is free. He registered it as an official nonprofit, printed clergy badges for his friends, and declared his car a mobile chapel. When police tried to tow it, he cited religious freedom, arguing that seizing the Church of Eternal Parking violated his right to worship. A judge couldn't find a legal reason to deny the filing since his religion met all nonprofit criteria. The city quietly dropped the case, fearing backlash. For months afterward, he parked anywhere with a halo of legal protection and a bumper sticker that read, "Blessed are the illegally parked." Eventually, Oregon rewrote its city codes, but Jeremy's church still accepts new members. Their only commandment? Thou shalt not parallel park crooked. 17. The banker who avoided jail by writing his own law. 1826, England. Meet Sir Francis Molyneux, a banker caught embezzling from his own firm. Facing prison, he pulled a power move that made lawmakers question reality. As a sitting member of Parliament, he invoked an ancient privilege. MPs couldn't be arrested during a legislative session, so he called a special emergency session of Parliament, then refused to adjourn it. For 3 straight months, he personally held continuous meetings, reading Shakespeare aloud to an empty room just to keep the session active. Legally, police couldn't touch him. When the king finally intervened, Molyneux smugly stated, "I'm guilty of greed, not of poor timing." He served 0 days in jail and retired rich. It's possibly the only time in history someone beat criminal charges by inventing the world's longest work meeting. If modern bankers tried that, they'd call it a webinar. 18. The woman who got out of jury duty by marrying the defendant. 1924, Alabama. When a woman named Rose Mayfield was selected for jury duty in her small Alabama town, she realized the defendant was her old flame, Harold. Instead of recusing herself, Rose pulled a move so legally confusing it made history. She married him. Overnight, she became his spouse, and the law barred spouses from serving on juries involving their partners. The court had to excuse her immediately, and the trial was delayed for weeks. When reporters asked if the marriage was real, she said, "As real as my desire to stay home." They divorced 2 months later, but the loophole was never forgotten. Alabama quickly added a clause banning intentional marital avoidance of civic duty. Locals still joke that Rose found the only legally binding way to skip jury duty and get a honeymoon. 19. The man who lived at the airport to avoid deportation, 1988 France. Mehran Nasseri, an Iranian refugee, discovered that bureaucracy had one Achilles heel: paperwork paralysis. When his passport was stolen mid-flight, he became trapped between countries. Neither France nor his home nation would claim him. So he moved into Terminal 1 of Charles de Gaulle Airport and stayed there for 18 years. He ate McDonald's daily, used the airport bathrooms, and wrote his autobiography on napkins. Lawyers realized he technically broke no laws. The terminal was international transit territory, not French soil. That made him legally homeless and stateless, but untouchable. When the government finally offered him residency, he refused, saying, "I live here now." His life inspired the terminal, but the real loophole was pure Kafka comedy. A man so legally invisible that the system forgot how to process him. 20. The fisherman who claimed his catch was in international water. 1999, Australia. In 1999, an Australian fisherman named Bruce Hollister was fined for exceeding his catch limit near Queensland. But Bruce had a GPS and a grudge. He argued that the fish he caught weren't technically Australian citizens. They'd been swimming toward international waters. His lawyer doubled down, claiming the fish crossed a sovereign boundary voluntarily. The courtroom erupted in laughter, but the judge was forced to review maritime charts. It turned out that the GPS coordinates placed Bruce's boat a mere 2 meters outside the boundary. The fine was voided, and Bruce became a local legend. To celebrate, he printed shirts reading "Citizen of International Waters" and sold them at the docks. The government later expanded the fishing zone, presumably to keep Bruce and his lawyer from starting a new aquatic nation. 21. The town that outsmarted prohibition with medicinal whiskey, 1920s, Kentucky. When alcohol was banned during Prohibition, one Kentucky town discovered a loophole wide enough to drive a whiskey truck through. Federal law allowed doctors to prescribe alcohol for medical use. So the local doctor, pharmacist, and mayor formed a perfect triangle of hypocrisy. The doctor prescribed whiskey for every ailment imaginable: coughs, back pain, emotional discomfort. The pharmacist filled each prescription, and the mayor's brother ran the only medical distillery in town. Within a month, half the population was apparently chronically ill. Inspectors showed up, but everyone had legal paperwork. The town became so famous for its miraculous ailments that nearby counties faked epidemics just to get access. When Prohibition ended, the doctor retired with the most lucrative medical record in Kentucky. He'd cured everyone's sobriety. 22. The tax collector who accidentally made his town tax-exempt, 1873, Ohio. Sometimes bureaucracy sabotages itself. In 1873, an Ohio tax collector named Leonard Finch forgot to renew his town's charter paperwork. Legally, that meant the town, population 600, ceased to exist. The IRS couldn't collect taxes from a non-entity, so Leonard quietly told no one. For the next 7 years, the ghost town kept functioning like normal. Schools open, shops running, no taxes paid. When a state auditor finally visited, he found the paperwork gap and demanded back payments. The townspeople refused, arguing they couldn't owe taxes for years they technically didn't exist. The court sided with them. Finch was fired, but became a local hero. His mistake turned into a 7-year holiday from the government. The new mayor's first official act? Double-check the charter, then frame Finch's resignation letter under the words, "Best accounting error in history." 23. The lawyer who sued himself and won, 1996, North Carolina. Robert Lee Brock, a prison inmate with way too much time on his hands filed one of the most absurd lawsuits in U.S. history. He sued himself for $5 million, claiming that by getting drunk and committing crimes he had violated his own civil rights. Since he was in prison and broke, he demanded the state pay on his behalf. The judge, equal parts amused and horrified, dismissed the case, but not before acknowledging Brock's creativity. In his written ruling, he stated, "While Mr. Brock's case is imaginative, he cannot sue himself for the actions of himself." The lawsuit became a legal legend, now taught in law schools under the chapter titled Frivolous Litigation and Human Ingenuity. Brock didn't win any money, but he achieved immortality, the only man in history to lose to himself in court and still make headlines. 24. The man who dodged jury duty for 20 years with one perfect excuse, 1981 to 2001, New York. Jerry Goldstein, a Brooklyn teacher, hated jury duty more than hangovers and grading papers combined. After being called once, he noticed something. The court system had no way to verify medical notes beyond a doctor's signature, so Jerry wrote his own. Every time he got summoned, he faxed in a letter from Dr. Herman Z. Goldstein, his alter ego, stating Jerry suffered from severe social anxiety triggered by prolonged sitting in wooden chairs. It worked for 20 years. When the scam finally unraveled, the court didn't even punish him. The judge reportedly laughed and said, "You've outsmarted the system longer than some mobsters." Jerry's response? "I'll happily serve, if you replace the benches with beanbags." They didn't. He never got called again. Some people earn their freedom. Jerry forged his. 25. The accountant who made his cow a corporation, 2013, Wisconsin. An accountant named Greg Holtz found a financial loophole in a farm subsidy law that gave benefits to registered agricultural corporations. So he incorporated his cow, Daisy. He filed articles of organization under the name Daisy Holtz, LLC, listing milk production and occasional mood enhancement as its business activities. The state approved it. Daisy received agricultural grants, a tax ID, and, unbelievably, a small business credit card. Greg milked the system, literally, for 2 years before regulators noticed that Daisy's signature on official forms was a hoof print. When questioned, Greg said, "She's not just a cash cow, she's self-employed." The loophole was closed, but not before Daisy earned enough income to buy a new barn. Greg lost his license, but his cow became the only bovine in Wisconsin with a corporate history longer than most startups. 26. The town that legalized crime for one day, 1972, Nevada. In 1972, a clerical error in the small town of Tonopah erased the date July 7th from the city's criminal code, literally deleting 24 hours from local law. Residents jokingly dubbed it Free Day. No one believed it until a few enterprising locals tested it. Public drinking, illegal fireworks, even a mock bank robbery staged for laughs. The sheriff, unsure what to do, called the state attorney general, who confirmed the horrifying truth. Tonopah had no enforceable laws for exactly one day. The next morning, everything snapped back to normal. The town fixed the glitch, but locals held an annual Freedom Festival to commemorate the chaos. The sheriff described it best. For one day, nobody broke the law, because there wasn't one. It was the closest America ever came to legal anarchy with parade floats. 27. The man who escaped jail. Using the postal rule, 1913, London. A London clerk named Reginald Barnes was sentenced to 90 days in jail for embezzlement. But before his official sentencing papers arrived at the prison, he noticed something. Under the postal rule, a contract only becomes binding when it's officially delivered. So he convinced a sympathetic clerk to delay mailing his commitment papers by one day. Then he walked out of the courthouse and vanished before the paperwork arrived. When police realized what had happened, they couldn't legally arrest him, because on paper his sentence hadn't commenced. By the time the mail caught up, Reginald was halfway to France, enjoying freedom courtesy of the British postal system. Lawmakers immediately amended the rule, but not before one tabloid dubbed him the mailman of mischief. It remains one of the slickest legal escapes in history, proof that sometimes freedom just needs a postage stamp. And there you have it, proof that the smartest criminals aren't in prison, they're in loopholes. From fake cows to sovereign swamps, humanity's greatest talent isn't invention, it's evasion. Which one deserves a medal for creativity? Tell me in the comments. right after you figure out if your cat qualifies as a tax deduction.